Story 1. What I'm about to share is the most harrowing memory I have. Not just for me, but for Carly too. I'm choosing to tell this of my own volition, but I needed her blessing before sharing it publicly. Her one request? That I tell the story as it truly happened. No exaggerations, no half-truths, just the raw, unfiltered reality. And to whoever's reading or hearing this, all she asks is that you treat it with respect. That would mean a great deal to both of us. So, with that out of the way, here's what happened. It was the spring of 2011 when Carly and I decided to go for a hike in a region called Amber Hollow, tucked deep into the northern stretch of the Cascade Wreath. Remote, forested country that feels like a whisper from a forgotten age. The area's a patchwork of jagged hills and sleepy creeks, with rickety dirt roads that twist away from the main route like fraying threads. It's the kind of place where GPS loses its nerve and cell service taps out early. The locals call it peaceful. Outsiders, if they know of it at all, usually call it off the map. One thing I didn't know then was that Amber Hollow had a bit of a reputation. Apparently, it was once tied to an old separatist movement. Folks who, decades ago, tried to carve their own little state out of the wilderness. They didn't want taxes, didn't want oversight, didn't want to be told how to live. Sounded like harmless rebellion in theory, but the area had since drawn a different kind of crowd. Survivalists, isolationists, people who wanted to vanish. People who didn't want to be found. We arrived in the early afternoon, filled with that hopeful energy only a new trail can give. After lunch in town, we set off on a loop trail that would take us up near Falcon Peak and the Red Fang Ridge. The forest air was sharp with pine and cool enough to keep the sun at bay. We talked, laughed, and for once there were no texts buzzing in our pockets, just silence and each other. By around 3:30 p.m., we were trudging up a steady incline when we found a narrow, overgrown path that branched off from the main trail. We'd ignored others like it earlier, but this time curiosity got the better of us. Roughly 100 yards in, tucked in a dimple of the hills, was a single log cabin, charming at first glance like something out of a fairy tale. But then we saw the truck out front. Mud-spattered, left idling with its door hanging open. Same with the cabin's door, wide open like a mouth. That's when he stepped out. Average height, early 30s maybe, with that sun-baked, hollow-look people get when they've lived too far from others for too long. He smiled as he waved. "Afternoon, folks. You're way off trail, huh?" Something about his smile didn't match his eyes. They scanned us too thoroughly, like we were a puzzle he was trying to solve. I told him we were just out enjoying the day, tried to keep things breezy. He played along, chatted about the weather, then asked if we wanted to come in for coffee. We declined, gracefully, said we had to beat the sunset and get back to the car, but he wouldn't let it go. "Ah, come on, not every day I get company out here," he said, stepping closer. "Y'all look like you could use a warm-up." His tone shifted. Not threatening, not yet, but urgent, almost needy. I glanced at Carly. Her hand found mine. We started backing away. That's when he reached behind him and drew a handgun. Inside. Now. There was no more debating. He motioned with the gun, sharp and deliberate, and herded us through the open doorway. As we stepped inside, he snapped. The door shut behind us and bolted it, and then he muttered something I'll never forget. "Hurry, they'll be here any minute." Who was they? Carly asked him softly, her voice trembling. He didn't answer, just pushed us into a corner, and told us to sit. I made a mistake then. Tried to play tough. "She asked you a question," I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. He spun, fast, and cracked the butt of the gun across my face. My vision burst into sparks. Carly screamed, an animal sound of helpless terror. "Shut up," he barked. "You talk again, I start shooting." Blood ran down my cheek, hot and slow. Carly asked to help, but he just sneered and said, "What's the point? We're all going to be dead soon anyway." He paced like a caged thing, eyeing the window every few seconds. Every time we flinched or whispered, he snapped his head around. The gun never left his hand. I kept scanning the cabin. No escape, no cover, nothing I could use. We were at his mercy, and he had none to spare. Then came the sound of helicopter blades in the distance. A faint hum that grew louder. His head jerked up. "They're here," he muttered. Story 2. The thumping of the rotor blades thickened the air, drawing nearer with every passing second. He backed away from the window, muttering to himself, gun gripped white-knuckled. That soft thread of hope, the idea that rescue was coming, started to pull at the edges of my fear. But as soon as that hope appeared, it was dragged down by something heavier. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside. Then came the amplified voice of authority, a megaphone. Firm, calm, commanding. "This is the county tactical response. Unit, we know you have hostages. Step outside with your hands up," the man snapped. He lunged at Carly, grabbed her by the wrist and hauled her toward the window, jamming the muzzle of the gun into her cheek so hard she whimpered. "Back off!" He screamed out the cracked glass. "You move an inch closer and I'll paint the walls with her." I tried to move, but he barked at me again. "Don't you move! Don't you dare!" And there was nothing in me but stillness and horror and raw, unfiltered rage. Rage at him. Rage at myself. Rage at whatever twisted timeline had put us here. Carly was sobbing now, her body frozen except for the trembling. "I swear to God," he said again, still pointing the gun at her face. "I'll do it. Try me." From outside, the police responded. Something about everyone wanting a peaceful resolution. Something about standing down. And it must have worked, because the man grinned wide. "That's what I thought," he said, a disgusting kind of satisfaction leaking into his voice. "You don't want her dead. You know I'll do it." He dragged her back to the corner where I was still kneeling. Then he looked at both of us like we were already dead. "You're my ticket out," he muttered. "You move, you die. If they come in here, you're a meat shield." Got it? No response from us, just silence and 1,000-yard stare. Then he paused. Head tilted, eyes flicking to the window again. Something had changed. I didn't know what, but he did. He started yelling again, firing shots through the busted window, glass at shadows only he could see. Outside, there was a brief, panicked exchange, shouting, a rustle of boots, maybe gunfire in return. Then he spun toward me. "Kneel," he ordered. "Hands behind your head, now." It hit me like a thunderclap. This was it. Execution posture. The end. And I wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to lunge at him with everything I had left. But I couldn't. My legs had turned into driftwood, my thoughts into fog. So I moved. Slowly. Knelt in the center of the room and whispered, "I love you," to Carly without daring to look back at her. The end of the gun pressed into the back of my head. "Come in here," he shouted again, "and he dies first." Time stopped. The air felt electric, like a storm was about to break the cabin apart. I ground my teeth together, eyes shut tight, fists clenched behind my back as I waited for the final sound I'd ever hear. Then, bang. Not mine. not aimed at me. Bang. Bang. I was shoved forward, the back of my head stinging, not from a bullet, but from the force of his body collapsing against me as it crashed to the floor. My ears rang. My breath was ragged. For a second, I truly believed I'd been shot and just didn't feel it yet. But when I looked back, I saw him on the floor, gasping, his eyes wild, blood spreading across his chest like ink in water. He was trying to speak, trying to suck air in. But it was too late. He coughed once, then stilled. SWAT officers stormed in, barked orders we didn't process. One of them tapped my shoulder. "You hit? You okay?" I think I nodded. I think I mumbled something. Doesn't matter. I was in another world, watching. The man who'd held our lives in his hands choke on his own final breath. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just stunned. 1 minute he was God and the next, dust. We were checked over, patched up, and escorted back into town. The medics cleaned my face, though the cut felt meaningless compared to what we'd just endured. We sat in a sheriff's office for hours, gave our statements, signed papers I barely read. When they finally let us go, we just sat in the car. Carly leaned into me. I held her as she cried, low, aching sobs that shattered whatever strength I had left. I cried too, out of a mix of everything. Terror, fury, guilt, but mostly relief. We had survived. We drove in silence. Didn't speak until the lights of the next town washed over us. Spent that night curled in her apartment, wrapped in old blankets, staring at the ceiling, not really sleeping, just breathing. We stayed together a few years after that. Things ended in 2014, but it wasn't ugly, just life moving in different directions. We check in with each other now and then, FaceTime every so often, send birthday texts. And somehow, every time we talk, it comes up. Not intentionally, not forced, just like some old scar itching under the skin. We lived through something nobody else we know has. I never ended up in therapy. Carly did, and she said it helped, but she also said the only thing better was talking to someone who was there. Someone who doesn't need you to explain the sound of a gun cocking behind your ear. They just know. Story 3. Back in 2013, I read this memoir called Ash and Sky by a writer named Serena Vale. Her life had basically crumbled after her dad died. Drugs, isolation, complete spiral. But she clawed her way out of it by hiking the length of the Western Range Trail. 3 states worth of mountain and dirt. Every blister on her feet seemed to strip away another layer of her grief until all that remained was who she was meant to be. It spoke to me. I was 22 when I read it, grasping at the edges of adulthood, trying to make sense of myself in a world that moved too fast. Something about that book made the idea of walking until I understood my own thoughts sound noble, almost holy. But I wasn't brave enough to hit the Western Range alone. Not yet. That changed a few years later, in the fall of 2016. I started small, weekend hikes, day loops, cheap gear. Eventually, I planned my own 5-night journey along a stretch of the trail near a place called Drywater Ridge, just brushing the Mojave's shoulder. I picked it for 3 reasons. It was drivable, the terrain wasn't too intimidating, and Serena had described it beautifully. I left my car at a dusty little RV stop, laced up, and started walking. That first day was grueling. 9 miles under a high, hot sky that turned every rock into a stovetop. I was dead on my feet by the time I reached a little bluff near Twin Ash Creek, barely able to muster the strength to eat. But I was proud. I'd started. Day 2, however, almost broke me. It was 20 miles over unrelenting switchbacks and sun-bleached trails. Climbing out of Drywater Hollow felt like dragging myself through fire. My legs burned. My pack bit into my spine. When I reached Lake Antara, glittering and freezing, just like the book had promised, I thought I'd collapse and never rise again. I remember standing in the water and laughing aloud. I was alive. I was exhausted. But I was alive. Day 3 was quieter, simpler terrain. Just 13 miles toward the Sugar Needle campgrounds. I let my mind drift. Let the silence soak into me. Let the wind comb through my thoughts. And then, somewhere in a grove of creaking cedar, I stepped off the trail to pee. When I came back, I must have picked the wrong fork. The trail started widening, the ground flattening until I realized it wasn't a trail at all. It was a dirt road, descending toward the far side of the valley. I stopped, checked my map, tried to orient myself, and that's when I heard someone behind me say, "Hey there." I turned too fast, heart stuttering in my chest. It was a man, older, tan, dressed like a retiree on a beach walk. Vest, sandals, wide-brim hat. He smiled, hands visible, clearly aware that he'd startled me. "Sorry," he laughed. "Didn't mean to spook you. Name's Callan. I live down that way." He pointed toward the road. We chatted. He told me he often met hikers who got turned around, said he admired what I was doing. Something about how books should change lives, not just collect dust. He offered to walk me back to the trail and guide me toward the Sugar Needle turnoff. I accepted. As we hiked, I mentioned the book that had inspired me. He told me he'd once read on the road and fantasized about escaping in a rusted van. He was kind, grounded. But then, somewhere in the middle of a sentence, he changed tracks. "Just a heads up," he said. "There's a guy who lives up in these hills. Name's Jonas. Locals call him Hollow Man." I blinked. "Hollow Man?" He nodded. "Hermit. Been around forever. Strange, but harmless." That last word hit me wrong. "Why say it at all?" I asked. "What made him strange?" Callan waved it off like he didn't want to get into it. Said it was a long story I'd likely never need. "Just, if you see him, don't be scared," he said. "He doesn't mean any harm." We parted ways not long after. He pointed me up a trail marked with a ribbon of red cloth tied to a tree. I thanked him, but my sense of calm had been replaced with unease. I kept hiking, made camp near a clearing I assumed was the Sugar Needle site, though it looked more like a forgotten picnic spot than an actual campground. No signage, no facilities, just weeds and wind and shadows. As I refilled my water bottle and sat down to rest, I felt someone watching me. I looked up. He stood maybe 50 yards away, half hidden behind a pine, camouflaged pants, long-sleeve shirt in streaky green. His beard was tangled and filthy, hair hanging in sheets across his eyes. Still as stone. Staring. I raised a hand. Awkward wave. He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he raised his own hand and mimicked my wave in a jerky, puppet-like fashion. It wasn't a hello. It was a reflection. A copy. I called out, "Are you Jonas?" He stared, then repeated in a perfect mockery, "Are you Jonas?" My stomach turned. The voice was wrong, like someone mimicking human speech without knowing what any of the words meant. I backed up, muttered something about needing to go, packed quickly, and the whole time, he stayed frozen behind that tree. I hiked another half-mile, then stopped, pulled out my sidearm, a compact pistol I'd legally obtained, trained with, and never thought I'd have to use. The cold steel felt like a tether to reality. That night, I set up camp again, now thoroughly alone. Built a fire, ate, tried to calm my nerves, and for a while, I did. The sky deepened into velvet. The stars came out and I actually caught myself smiling, until I heard movement. Not animal movement, footsteps, human, slow, deliberate, just beyond the firelight. "Jonas," I called. Silence. Then a breathy mimic. "Jonas?" I stood up, heart pounding. "I don't want trouble," I said. "I'm armed. Please walk away." Quiet. Then, "Please walk away." I saw nothing, just trees. But I felt him, and I knew he was just outside the circle of flame. I sat with my pistol across my lap. Eventually the steps receded, but I didn't sleep. Not really. Not after I heard him climb a tree nearby. Branches creaking, movement above my tent, no other sounds, just the slow stretch of limbs high in the dark, and then singing, a hushed, tuneless melody, like a child murmuring to themselves in a fever dream. I'm just a little sleepwalker, walking through my dreams, dreamin' of the girl I'm gonna keep. I lay in that tent frozen, fingers curled around my gun, eyes wide, heart thundering. I wanted to scream, to run, but I stayed still, trembling until dawn, peeled the night away. By morning, he was gone. I packed, fast, paranoid. Every sound was a threat, every tree a hiding place. I hiked with my gun in hand, barrel down, finger off the trigger, but always ready. When I reached Lake Antara again, I spotted the dusty outline of motels nearby and veered off trail without hesitation. I bought a room, took a hot shower, and sobbed like I hadn't since I was a kid. Then I fell into a restless sleep. And yes, I dreamed. He was there in the dark, humming his song, whispering my name in his broken, borrowed voice. I've hiked since then, many times. But I've never let myself forget that song. Or the shadow of a man who watched me from the trees and sang about keeping me. Not me, Jonas. Not me. Story 4. This was supposed to be one of those light-hearted, off-grid getaways. A couple nights on the Crest Walk Trail, trading city noise for campfire banter and maybe a few beers stashed deep in our packs. It was me, Nate, and Ronan, best friends since college. We'd spent weeks planning the trip, routes, snacks, playlists. Everything was about taking it easy, clearing our heads, and maybe arguing over who the greatest 49ers quarterback was. We hit the trail on a Friday morning, spirits high, jokes flying, the air crisp enough to bite through the flannel they stubbornly wore anyway. That day was perfect. Long, shaded hikes, good conversation, the smell of pine and possibility. By late afternoon, we found a perfect place to make camp, near a fast-running stream, shallow but clear enough to see the pebbles shift with the current. While Nate and Ronan wrangled the firewood, I took a walk down to the water. I'd worked up a sweat that day. My shirt clung to me like a wet napkin, and I just needed a moment to cool off. I took it off, splashed some water across my face and chest, then rinsed the shirt out and let it hang over a low branch. I remember slipping my watch into the pocket of my hiking pants, or at least I thought I did. Later, back at camp, I reached into that pocket and felt nothing. No watch. I retraced my steps down to the stream and scanned every inch of riverbed, but it was gone. My best guess, it must have slipped loose and vanished into the current. It wasn't a fancy watch, just one I liked, a gift from my older brother. Still, I shrugged it off. Annoying, yeah, but no reason to let it ruin a weekend. The rest of the trip was smooth. Nothing weird, no bumps in. The night. Just us, the trees, and the crackle of campfire stories. Then came the last day. We were just finishing the hike out, maybe 100 yards from the car, when Ronan suddenly slowed his pace and pointed up ahead. "Yo," he said. "What the hell is that?" I looked up and froze. There, dangling from a branch maybe 6 feet off the ground, was my watch. Tied. Neatly, like someone had looped the strap around the branch and left it hanging like an offering. Nate turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Wait, is that?" "Yeah," I muttered, stepping forward. They made way, and I gave a little jump, snagging it off the branch. But the second my fingers closed around it, I yanked my hand back. It was wet. Not water wet. Slick. A glistening, translucent slime coated the watch, thick and viscous, trailing off like jelly stretched too far. "Jesus, what is that?" Nate asked, leaning closer. I dropped the thing to the ground like it had burned me. The stuff on it was cold, colder than it should have been in the midday sun. It clung to my fingers like spider silk dipped in oil. I started rubbing my hands on the grass, gagging. My friends were already cracking jokes. "Oh dude, it's that kind of slime." But I wasn't laughing. "Seriously," I said. "This isn't funny. Something's off." They stopped grinning pretty quick when they saw my face. We all stared at the watch for a long beat. Then Nate said, "So, someone found it, hung it there, but what's with the gunk?" I didn't answer. I didn't have one. It wasn't sap, it wasn't Vaseline. It wasn't anything I could name. And the smell. Earthy, sour, wrong, like wet leaves rotting in a plastic bag left out in the sun. I considered rinsing it in my water bottle, but something in me recoiled at the thought, like the slime had come from somewhere it shouldn't have. Ronan said, maybe some local kids playing a prank. Maybe. But something about it felt older, stranger, not just mischief. By the time we got back to the car, the mood had curdled. The usual trailhead buzz, the high fives, the recap of dumb moments and foot blisters, was gone. We sat in silence, each of us trapped in our own version of what just happened. I tossed the watch into a trash bin behind the ranger station without another look. Back home, I tried to make sense of it. I Googled things like weird slime in forests and watch covered in jelly, which just led me down a rabbit hole of cryptid blogs and science articles about algae. None of it fit. Eventually, I let it go. Kind of. But here's the thing. Months passed. Life went back to normal. Yet, whenever I hiked after that, a new kind of alertness crept into me. I stopped letting the wilderness lull me. Every broken branch, every movement at the edge of my vision became something to pay attention to. And sometimes I catch myself wondering, was that really a prank? Or did something find that watch? Something that wasn't quite human? Something that wanted me to know it had been close, that it had touched something of mine, and decided to leave it behind. Not for kindness, but for a message. Love stories that send shivers down your spine? Got a creepy tale of your own, from deep in the woods, a forgotten trail, or a close call with the unknown? Share your true horror story with us in the comments. Your experience could be featured in a future video. Which story hit you the hardest? The cabin standoff, old Jonas, or the slime watch? Drop your pick in the comments below. We want to hear. What haunted you most? Tag a friend who'd never hike again after hearing this.